November will mark the 60th United States presidential election, occurring every 4 years since 1788. In that year, the recently independent nation held its first election for the presidency, a federal position created in the newly drafted Constitution. And while the process set many precedents still in use, it differed in many ways from what we would recognize today. When the office of the presidency was proposed during the drafting of the Constitution, there was already broad agreement on who should occupy it. The challenge was convincing him to accept. After leading the Continental Army to victory in the American Revolutionary War, George Washington looked forward to a quiet life and had only briefly come out of retirement in 1787 to help draft the Constitution. But almost as soon as he returned to his Virginia farm, friends and admirers both home and abroad begged him to accept the presidency as the only person with broad enough support to unify the nation. Washington turned down the offer multiple times before reluctantly accepting, hoping right up until the election that someone else would be chosen. His wish was not granted, making this the only presidential election won by someone who didn't want the position. Despite the lack of competition for the presidency, this was the first chance to put the constitutionally stipulated electoral system into practice. The election would be decided by an electoral college, composed of electors from each of the states, with each state legislature free to decide how their electors would be chosen. In Connecticut, Georgia, South Carolina, and New Jersey, electors were simply appointed by the state government, while Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Virginia, Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania held elections. However, those would be the only 10 of the original 13 colonies to participate. North Carolina and Rhode Island had yet to ratify the Constitution, while New York failed to appoint any electors due to a deadlock between its two legislative chambers. Given the 3 missing states, the 4 states with no popular elections, and vote being limited to white property-owning men in the remaining 6 states, this presidential election would have the lowest turnout in U.S. history. At the time, each presidential elector was given 2 votes, each of which had to be cast for a different candidate. The candidate with the most votes would become president, while the runner-up would become vice president. Of the 72 electors who convened on February 4, 1789, 3 did not cast a vote, while the remaining 69 unanimously voted for Washington. The vice presidential slot, however, was contested. John Adams ultimately secured the position by receiving 34 votes, with some also going to John Jay, Robert Harrison, John Hancock, and others. The first presidential election in the United States was a novel event, the first of its kind not only in the country, but in the contemporary world. Despite its challenges and oddities, it successfully established an institution that has continued unbroken for 236 years, making the United States the world's oldest continuously functioning democratic republic.